Hey everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well and welcome to episode 83 of my Metal Vault, where I'll be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within heavy metal to thrash metal to death metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it, all of that excellent stuff. As well as talking about the albums, I will also be talking about the band, so a brief history and any releases leading up to the album that I have picked. And I have another awesome, underrated death metal album right here. And of course, another band all the way from Sweden. Of course, I spoke about At the Gates in my last episode. So I thought, let's talk about another Swedish death metal band before I go on to the next band, which is all the way from the Netherlands. But let's stick with Sweden for now. And these guys are still going today, still going strong, been active since the late 1980s. I am talking about Therion, who I've yet to see live, and they are there's another band on my list that I've yet to see, but once they're doing tours again or they're playing a festival that I'm planning to go to, I will be watching them. And the more, well, they are operatic symphonic metal today, but back in the late 80s to early mid 90s, they were a death metal band, and it all started with this release right here. So, without further ado, once again, this is Therion with their 1991 debut of Darkness. And this had a lot of competition back in 1991. Of course, you had Cannibal Corpse releasing their second album, Butchered at Birth. You had Suffocation's Effigy of the Forgotten. You had Human by Death, From Beyond by Massacre. You had Considered Dead by Gorguts. The list goes on. The Ten Commandments by Mevlik Creation. The list just goes on with how many albums within death metal were coming out at that same time as this. Hence why I said it's a underrated album, because I don't think a lot of people. I mean, fair few of you within the underground scene would have back in the day, but I'm not sure how much recognition it got back in the day. Of course, it was released on Peaceville/Death Records, which is their sub label, of course, which always released bands' albums on that label as well as the main label. Of course, nice purple writing on the black background, a nice band picture there of them in the woods. And let's show another band picture there with that little piece of artwork right there. And then lyrics. Yeah, this album right here. Of course, another one that I bought at Black City Records. I thought I heard this album before, and I've known about this band since maybe the late 2000s, early 2010s, because obviously my mates are a fan of this band. I think more the symphonic stuff, but of course I love my death metal more than my symphonic metal. But I do like some bands within the genre, and I do like their stuff in that genre as well as this. So before I talk about this album in its entirety and the songs, let's talk about the band itself. Whereabouts in Sweden are they from? So they are from Stockholm, Sweden. That's where they formed back in 1987 under a different name, then changed it to Megatherion in 88, and then just to Therion in the same year. But now they're split between two countries. So two countries, Sweden and Malta, called death metal back in late 80s to early mid 90s, and then around that time in the mid 90s, possibly late 90s, more went to more symphonic style of metal, so operatic symphonic metal. And well, they are currently on um Napalm Records. Well, I was going to say another record label then. I was going to say Peaceful. Not sure when they left Peaceville, but we'll say went on to another label. Some bands will do that, of course. Some go to other labels, some stick with the same label, like Autopsy, who have been with Peaceville for I don't know how many years now. I think since they signed with them. But yeah, there's still some bands going strong on that label today. And of course, these guys were part of that label for well, good chunk of the 90s, I would say. But yeah, all started with this release right here. But before this release, they had demos. So, paroxysmal, a paroxysmal holocaust. I almost said apocalypse then. I don't speak of apocalypse then. I'll say that again. Paroxysmal Holocaust came out in April 1989. Limited to 600 copies. It was an independent release, 3 tracks on there. The runtime of that demo was 19 minutes and 38 seconds. And then they had Beyond the Darkest Veil of Inner Wickedness, also 3 tracks, released the same year, but in November of '89, 500 copies limited. But before I carry on with the other releases, on this first demo, they had Matty from Dismember, who of course was in quite a lot of bands back in the late '80s, early '90s. Carbonized, Carnage, General Surgery, and of course to mention again Therion and Barbary, I think was as another band that he played drums for. Who not sure when they formed, but they were death metal and grindcore. So he was in that band. I think was only did that album because he was in the band only that year of 1989. And of course, Christopher went on to do vocals going forward after that demo. And then we got their rehearsal demo from 1990, which only had 2 tracks, also a independent release, but not sure what format it was released on, most likely cassette. And Time Shall Tell, which was their EP from 1990, which was on House of Kick Records, which is no longer going. That was 4 tracks. And of course, a couple of tracks from that EP ended up on their debut. So let's talk about the debut. Who's on the album? So Christopher Jonsson. I was going to say Johansson then. Christopher Jonsson, vocals, guitar. Peter on guitar, lead guitars, because Christopher did the rhythms. Oscar on the drums and Eric on bass. And of course, we had Johan doing the inner cover art. Thomas Skogsberg doing the engineering and producing. Now everyone will know who he is. You know, Dismember, Entune, Amon Amarth, you name it. Name a band, he's done their albums. A legend within metal, just in general, a legend within the metal scene, and has just produced banger after banger after banger. Then we had Gary doing the artwork, and then Matt's doing the photography. So this picture and the other one with inside the vinyl within the inner lay itself. Well, this picture right here, as I showed earlier. So, of course, label was released on was Death Records. Of course, for those who don't know, it was the sub label of Peaceful. Is since closed, but did release quite a few albums on that label. And I mean, like I've said before, if you haven't listened to this album and you are a fan of death metal, this is definitely one for you. So we got 8 songs all together, and all just fierce, nasty, atmospheric, dark death metal. Just got with like couple. One of the songs on here has like a very dirty bass tone, and it's like when I hear that, because of you playing bass myself, I'm just like, yeah, dirty, nasty, filthy bass tone. The vocals are just monstrous. Not because there's the pitch shifter that makes it sound like a demon, which of course General Surgery used on their debut EP came out in 1991, and of course, Carcass using it on their first two albums, but giving it that much more like, because obviously you got like the Grim Reaper type of character right there. So yeah, you got songs like The Return, Asphyxiate with Fear, Morbid Reality, Megalomaniac, A Suburb to Hell, Genocidal Raids, Time Shall Tell, and Dark Eternity. And kicking off would be The Return, which is just in your face, and it's got like Christopher doing his growls and then just screaming, and then the guitars, bass, and the drums on top of that just gives it it's giving it that boost, along with Asphyxiate with Fear. Again, just carrying on from where the first song left off, just adding more and more of that nasty tone I was talking about, the nasty atmospheric dark death metal tone I was saying. And then Morbid Reality being one of the longest songs on it, the longest song on it, clocking in at 6 minutes and 5 seconds, getting a lot more, still bringing that heaviness, still bringing that nastiness, and then pushing that to the next one, Megalomaniac. And a bit later on, you would hear in like the later tracks, you will hear that pitch shifting, demon-esque vocals, which of course a lot of bands were using back in the day, and of course is more popular within gore grind, but there were bands using that back then. I did mention Carcass, and then of course General Surgery used it a lot within, well, still use it a lot in their music, but yeah, these guys were using it as well. And then a suburb to hell, just right off the bat gets in there with the guitars, with the bass, with the drums, with the vocals. And had a quite a bit of a symphonic tone already there, because it just felt a bit like an album that you would put within a horror film. It has that vibe. And then Genocidal Raids, which was just a fierce song in itself. With a name like that, you're definitely gonna get some fierce, nasty, in your face death metal. And then Time Shall Tell, of course, which was the title of their EP from 1990. Still bringing the brutality, you're still getting Christopher's vocals in the forefront, you're still getting the guitars, you're still getting all of that awesome greatness that you would get in death metal, that nice little, just all like that death metal guitar, the bass, the drums, that overall death metal sound, and then of course ending with Dark Eternity, just ending the song, ending the album, shall I say, perfectly. Clocking in at 39 minutes and 29 seconds. Ah, I thought it was getting a bit dry then. But yeah, this album right here, Thomas Stogsberg did a beautiful job producing it, engineering it. And I mean the man is a bloody genius when it comes to especially death metal. The extreme side of metal. And I think everything he touches just turns to gold. This is definitely one of those albums right here. These lads did an excellent job performing on it. So big well done to you guys. Big well done to, again, to Thomas Skogsberg for the engineering and producing of the album. Gary's artwork just encapsulate the tone of the album. And Matt's band photos right here, photography skill, absolutely top notch right there, of course. I love old band pictures. I've said before, I'm a sucker for them, and that's absolutely brilliant. And of course, it's death metal and nature. But yeah, this album right here, like I said, it came out in the year of 1991, and it didn't. I don't think it really got the recognition that it deserved, because there were so many other albums, like I could mention earlier on, that came out that same year. not just in death metal, but in thrash and heavy metal and grindcore and um, doom metal, sludge metal, and then of course you had Skyclad's first album that came out in that same year. So a lot of these albums were in competition with each other, but all equally fucking awesome. And yeah, this is definitely, like I said, a dark, heavy record. Like I said, that dark death metal tone, which I love because it just gives you that that riff face, that oh, that massive amount of that joy you get from listening to a record such as this and the albums that I mentioned and all the other albums that I've covered here on the vault. But this album definitely needed to be spoken about in this series as well as others that I will be chatting about. And hopefully we'll get to 100 episodes by the end of this year. But yeah, episode 83, I thought let's talk about this. And of course it's going to be in a lot of collections. I don't think I've seen it spoke about too much, but I'm fairly sure the ones I know within the VC own this album in one format or another, or own it in every format. Because I know some of you are collector scum. We gotta collect. We gotta keep collecting the formats from each, keep of the album, just each format. So be it vinyl, CD, or cassette. But yeah, this album conclusion. Well, it's heavy, no doubt about that. It's dark. It's nasty. It's atmospheric. It's just an unrelenting album with the odd little break in between. So, like one song, I believe it was on Megalomaniac, where it has that nasty bass tone. So it just stops and you got that bass tone and it just kicks right back in. And of course, is a timeless masterpiece. Like every album that I've spoken about in this series is a timeless masterpiece. And they all have their own little flair, their own little unique thing about them. And I think the unique thing about this is, and I think with a lot of album, well, it's dark and heavy, and it just blends it so well. I think that's what's unique about it. Because like I said, there's going to be one little thing that might be unique to every album that I've covered, which I don't think I've ever touched on, but just knowing how much I love this album and the albums that I've spoken about before. But yeah, if you've not heard this, give it a listen. Let me know what you think down below. And I still need to get their albums because I've got one of their later albums when obviously being a symphonic metal band now. So here's another band's collection I need to complete. So once again, dark, heavy, nasty, unrelenting Swedish death metal, timeless masterpiece. Therion and Of Darkness. And that's it for this episode. 83 episodes. How crazy is that? I'm hoping to get to 100 by the end of this year. If not, I'll probably stop at, let's say, episode 90 and then continue on from there. But who knows? I might be able to fit a bit more in because I love doing this series. There's still a lot more albums for me to do. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, I will be doing a collection update soon. I still got quite a lot to listen to for that collection update to happen, but it is coming. So thank you very much for tuning in. And if you enjoy my content, don't forget to like the video, share it around, comment down below about Therion, about this album in particular. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe so you can keep up to date with everything that I have got coming up on this channel. So, I've been Jake of Jake's Metal Chat. Keep that banner of metal well and truly high. Do take care of yourselves, and I will see you all in another episode of my Metal Vault.